I lived in a really small town about 2 hours away from the Appalachian Mountains, like the kind of town where nothing ever happens. As a teenager, I was always jealous of the fact that there were never any concerts, any comedy shows, festivals, really anything except the county fair once a year. So, when my friend told me about a music festival happening up in the mountains, I was ecstatic. I would finally get the chance to feel like a normal teenager. The whole vibe was supposed to be a mix of Woodstock and a Ren Lair, which was a little weird, but I wasn't in a position to complain. I was about 17, so I still had to ask my parents. They said no. Looking back, I understand. Their 17-year-old daughter wanted to drive 2 hours away to attend a hippie-like music festival with her friend and no adults. I wouldn't let my kid go either. But I was a little shit in my teen years, since there was never anything to do. Me and my friends had to make our own fun. Needless to say, this wasn't my first time sneaking out. It was around 6 p.m. when my friend messaged me telling me she parked down the street. So I grabbed my things and climbed out of my window. It was a ranch-style home, so it was to just climb in and out of my window. Once I got in her car, we started driving out to the mountains. We actually made it there in only an hour because we didn't exactly obey traffic laws or speed limits the whole time. We parked about a mile away. So, we had to walk through the woods for a while. It was the summertime, so it wasn't dark yet. We eventually made it and noticed pretty fast this wasn't really a professionally set up thing. There wasn't even any security. We were able to walk right in. We walked around for a bit, hopping from one area to another. The stages were made with cinder blocks and plywood, but what was even more strange was everyone else there. Remember how I said it was a small town? Well, the surrounding areas weren't any bigger, and it wasn't exactly Coachella, so how was it packed full of people? I noticed how everyone else seemed totally zoned out, how we were the only ones moving, talking, and even dressed to fit the loose theme. Everyone else were all dressed like they were from different points in history. Some looked like they were from the 80s, while some looked like a pilgrim. The whole thing was just strange from the moment we got there. Me and my friend hadn't really been listening too much to the lyrics of the music, but once we started it only made the unsettling feeling we had 10 times worse. Themes of run and get out, phrases like save yourself. We decided all of it was just way too weird. So, we turned around to start to leave, and suddenly, it was an empty field again, like there was never any music festival at all. We knew we had to leave. Whatever was happening wasn't right. We began walking back to the car. It was still light out, but yet we kept seeing a human-like shadow lurking behind trees. We could only see it out the corner of our eyes. When we would look at it, it disappeared. After a few times of seeing this thing, we started running. It was only a mile, which wouldn't take that long, especially if you were running as fast as we were. Next thing we knew, it was suddenly dark, like we had been there for hours. We both felt like there was something following us, and we could feel it getting closer. Looking back, my legs were burning, but in that moment I couldn't feel anything but fear. After what felt like years, we suddenly found ourselves out of the woods. I kept running, seeing the car already. That's when we heard a blood-curdling scream. I heard a ghostly voice whisper in my ear, "Don't look back. Keep going." My friend must not have heard the same voice. Or, B, she didn't listen. All I know is that she saw something. I made it to the car first, but she had the keys. Eventually she made it to the car as well, unlocked it, and we both got inside. We started driving back home. We were silent the whole time. She dropped me off where she picked me up, but that was the last time I ever saw her. She stopped coming to school, stopped answering her phone. I even called her parents once. She was still alive. This was about 15 years ago. I graduated and got the hell out of that town. I moved to the West Coast, went to college, graduated, and even started a family with my husband. I've spoken to a few people about my friend from back then. Apparently, she's not doing the best. Addiction, alcohol abuse, even mental health facilities. All I know for certain is that Whatever she saw that day really messed her up. In all honesty, I truly wish I could tell you where this all happened. Maybe then you could stay away from whatever that was, or at least be prepared to face it in a way that I wasn't able to first. Some history. I've been wandering the wilderness and back roads for years. I grew up in an extremely abusive house. Early on, I wandered out and simply decided to never look back. From there, I simply just kept wandering and wandering, spending years, all my life, wandering. Wandering for what? To what? I don't know. All I know is that it was sometime mid-fall that I stopped wandering and started running for my life. The door jingled as I pushed it open. The cashier greeted me cheerfully as I walked through the door. Of course, I knew I wasn't going to be there very long. Normally, I just buy essentials like fire starters or flashlights, or batteries. With money I get cooking meals for other travelers. But winter was coming up, which meant convenience store non-perishables. As I was checking out my many Pop-Tarts, the cashier had started going off about some strange events in the outside roads, missing people, but I wasn't really paying attention. It was pretty standard on some of these back roads. Unexperienced fools decide to go hiking on a whim, and then accidents happen. I should have listened. Halfway to the road, I started to get a certain feeling. I can't really explain it to you well, and I hadn't felt it below or since, but if I had to try, it's like a pressure change. Like something big was coming, and oh boy, something big was coming. This mysterious pressure feeling stuck with me for hours after, until a little after sundown. Then, something hit me. It started as a bad headache, that sense of pressure mounting and mounting, slowly making my head hurt more and more. Then it became a stomachache too, a gut-wrenching stomach-ache. In a soft panic, I began fumbling a bottle of purified water I had on me and chugged the whole thing. And when that didn't stop the excruciating pain of the pressure migraine, then I noticed it, the noise. It started faint, only a rustle, but by the time I noticed it, it was getting louder and louder, with the momentum of a freight train. Quickly, I turned around, facing down the road. I saw it. First, it was glinting in the night, then something else started glittering, and then I saw its teeth. At first, I didn't know what I was looking at, but once it started getting closer, I realized what those two huge pale shapes were, teeth, and I swear, I was looking at a giant snake, big enough to cover the entire two-lane road, and tall enough I couldn't see the top of the creature. Suddenly, I'm jolted out of my trance, and a bolt to the side of the road, with no time to spare. Turning to look at the snake as it passed, I observed it, maybe for only a second. I saw what I assumed to be its eyes, staring forward, uninterested. Then it was gone, like it didn't care what, or who, it swallowed up. Then, just like that, its head was gone, and the rest of the smooth light brown scales of the snake started rushing past. And in that split second, I turned around back in the direction the snake came from, and they were the wolves. Huge, ravenous, and at least 5 feet tall, and in another split second, they were tossed into the air by a huge air wave, carrying not only them to the air, but me as well. By the time I came back to consciousness, the tail of the snake was nearly gone, only a foot or two high, and the end was in sight. But I had no time to dwell on my crushed goods and bruised bones, because the wolves were out here, and so was the snake. At least now I knew better than to travel those roads again. Hello, my name is James, and every single man in my family has inexplicably died right at the age of 32 from a rare genetic condition. Or at least I thought so until I found my older brother Peter having a seizure last week. Peter had called me early that day stating that he didn't feel good and that he didn't want to spend his 32nd birthday alone. Knowing how important this age is in my family, I left work early and drove over to his house. As I neared the front door, I heard a loud scream. I quickly ran inside and saw Peter on the floor vigorously shaking. I quickly put a pillow under his head and went to call 911. However, right before I dialed, I heard a faint voice behind me. Don't call that man. I'm fine, Peter said. What the fuck are you talking about, man? I said as I ran to his side. I need to call ambulance. You just had a fucking seizure. It's fine, dude. I've had a couple this week. I usually feel better after some rest, Peter said as he smiled up at me. Double quotes fine. But I'm calling mom. I said with that. I helped Peter into bed and gave my mom a call. Double quotes hello James. How are you doing? My mother asked. Not so good. Peter had a seizure. Apparently, he's been getting them all week, I said nervously. There was silence for a couple seconds before my mother spoke again with a cold, neutral tone. Double quotes James. I need to tell you about your father. She said sternly. Double quotes what? I said as I psychically recoiled as the abrupt change to discussion. I don't remember much about my father, other than that his name was Patrick. I recently learned that my mother had Peter when she was 22 and my father was 25 due to a happy accident. At the time, they had attempted to make the most of the situation, and my father had been very involved for the first 2 years of Peter's life, going as far to try to have another child, me. According to my mother, shortly after she found out she was pregnant with me, my father's mental health had begun to rapidly decline. Double quotes, it was on the 16th anniversary of his father's passing. My mother said over the crackling of her phone, Patrick, your father, had gone to visit his mother as he did every anniversary. Usually, he would be there for a couple hours, but this time he had been at his mother's place all night. I was about to call him when he stormed back into the house. What does this have to do with Peter? I asked impatiently as I paced back and forth. Peter just had a seizure. This isn't the time to talk about Dad. He said that he needed to go to the hospital and get a vasectomy right away, and that I had to get an abortion, my mother said, clearly choked up. Jesus Christ, he wanted to abort me, I said as I slowly slid down the wall onto the floor. I was absolutely appalled and shocked when he asked me to do that. I told him I would never under any circumstances, my mother said as she began to breathe heavily. That's when he had attempted to drug me to force a miscarriage. I couldn't even speak. Even though I had never met my father, I couldn't imagine someone doing such an unspeakable evil to someone that they loved and their unborn child. The silence lingered for a couple seconds before my mother continued. I called the police after the drugging, and he had gotten 7 years in jail for attempted manslaughter charges. I didn't see him again until I had to testify at his trial. The whole time I was speaking, he wouldn't even look at me. It wasn't until his testimony that he confronted me directly. Double quotes, what did he say? I said as I held my hands up to my face. He said that he loved me and you boys, but that he had made a serious mistake having you. He said it was his biggest regret. Double quotes, how could he say he loved me if he regretted having me so much? I yelled, slowly getting angry at this man whom I had clearly never met. I thought the same thing until a couple years ago when your grandmother had unexpectedly came by. What the fuck are you talking about? I said as I jumped to my feet. Do you regret having me too? My mother didn't respond and continued speaking. She had stopped by around 10 p.m. with an ancient-looking book with our last name on it. Before I could even ask her what an 88-year-old woman was doing up so late, she ushered me to the kitchen and sat me down. What did she say? I asked, utterly floored at the conversation I was having. Double quotes James. When I told you that your father had died from complications of a rare genetic disorder, I wasn't entirely telling you the truth. Double quotes Mom. I asked before she cut me off. You need to listen. What is happening to your brother is the beginning of the process. The process. What the fuck are you going on about? I yelled. It starts roughly 6 months after you turn 31. You first begin to rapidly bald. I remembered in that moment poking fun at Peter for his rapidly receding hairlines during one of family poker games, and how mad my mother had gotten. Double quotes soon after. Your skin begins to flake off and become almost scaly. I remember Peter calling me complaining about how he had suddenly been dealing with bad eczema. After a couple months of this, you begin having night terrors, which lead to insomnia. Double quotes mom. Peter's been complaining about issues with sleep for the last couple weeks. What the fuck is happening? I screamed. My fear only amplified when I heard the sounds of breaking glass and screaming coming from the guest room where I had laid Peter down. I quickly dropped the phone and flung open the door to see Peter violently shaking on the ground surrounded by glass from a broken mirror. As I stared at him, he began to projectile vomit blood onto the blue carpet. Jesus Christ! I screamed as I ran to the phone to fail 911. Just as the operator began to ask me questions, I caught a glimpse of Peter from the reflection off a window that made me turn around in horror. As I stood motionless, I watched as a bulge in Peter's stomach began to form and travel up towards his neck. As it moved, Peter's limbs began to flail uncontrollably, as if the nerves which control them were short-circuiting. As the bulge reached his neck, his body ceased to move and his jaw began to stretch open until it nearly snapped. Suddenly, I saw a pair of hands pop out from the bloody crevice, desperately attempting to find a solid hold on Peter's mouth. As it pulled itself up, I saw a deformed head emerge from his throat, followed by a small torso. This creature, which was completely bald and covered in blood and organ matter, tumbled from Peter's corpse and onto the floor. "What are you?" I said shakily as I fell onto the bed. The creature then turned and looked at me and I screamed, causing it to crawl away rapidly. As it did, a cluster of tendrils began to pour out of Peter's mouth and follow behind the creature, leaving a trail of blood and glossy film. As it disappeared from the doorway, I blacked out. When I came to, I was in a mental stabilization until the nurse had told me that when the police arrived, that I had been found covered in blood and hugging Peter's body, and that I had been muttering "it has his face" nonstop. According to them, it took giving me high doses of morphine for me to pass out. After 6 months of intensive care and a non-guilty verdict related to my brother's death, I was finally able to go home with my wife. As we parked the car in our driveway, she turned and gave me a big hug. "I'm so glad you're home, baby. I know how awful this year has been, but I have an amazing birthday present for you." "What is it?" I asked, having forgot that my birthday had been a week prior. Double quotes. "Well, I didn't know how to bring this up since you had your episode, but 5 months ago I found out that I'm pregnant," she said as she happily threw her arms around me. As she said those words, it was as if the whole world froze. "You're gonna be a dad to a healthy baby boy," she said as she kissed my cheek. As she pulled away. She must have seen how I was asking because she suddenly frowned. "What's wrong? Are you not happy?" she said as she tugged on my arm. Hearing her whirring, I snapped out of my daze and smiled at her. "No, I'm fine. Sorry, I just remembered that I had to do something in the garage." "Okay," she said hesitantly, "but don't be too long. I'm gonna make us some dinner." I flashed her a smile before heading off into the garage. As I am currently writing this, I can't help but stare at my gun locker in the corner. I've always wanted to be a father that I never had. I ate healthy and exercised daily to make sure that I would be the first in my family to make it past 32. But I guess some curses can never truly be broken.